All right, what's going on, YouTube? How we doing out there? It is Friday, so you know what it is. It's Form Check Friday. I got a crisp, clean shave on the old noggin. We're gonna go for it here. So what we do on this program is we take the lifts that you've submitted and we put them up on the screen behind me. I give you some advice. I'm a powerlifting coach. I'm a powerlifter. I've been competing for 10 years. I've been coaching for 8 or 9 of those. We've done a bunch of stuff and I'm trying to help people be better. I'm trying to do something for the community here. If you're looking to submit, and I know a lot of you might be, I'll show you how. So what you're gonna wanna do is you wanna head over to this website right here. This is calgarybarbell.com. You wanna click this button right here, FCF. We also, of course, have our training app if you're interested, but you're going to use this submission form here. Make sure to give us some context and some details here. If you have something specifically you want us to look at, if you have a certain issue with your lifts, that gives me a little bit of a breadcrumb trail. That way I can get onto the scent a little quicker and get you some help with your lifts. Now, every episode we leave off with a lifter and we have the community comment about their form, their technique, how things are looking, and offer their advice. So we're going to start off with the lifter we left off with last time, and that is Raymond. So Raymond is here doing some bench press. This is 122.5 kilos. He said this is a 1RM. This is near 10 RPE for him. And he's been going to the gym for 4 years at this point. He's only spent 1 month focused on powerlifting. Now, he says he's recently implemented pauses. He's recently implemented a wider grip and utilizing leg drive in his bench press. Now, the things that he feels like he can work on are his tension during the pause and balancing the bar. He said he wonders if it's a shoulder mobility issue. I'm guessing what he means is that he's got, you know, kind of an uneven lockout, which is not all that uncommon. And he also wants to work on his bar path. So let's start from the start here. One of the things I think might be a little problematic is this unrack. Now, I would probably get yourself a little further in so that we're not unracking from so far back. I think we're really having to like lose a fair bit of shoulder position. You can see he snags on the J-cup on the way out. If we play this through, there's a hard time fishing it out of there. So we might even want to bring this down a little bit, right? We might even want to see this height dropped just 1 so that we can unrack a little easier. And the other thing, like I said, is I'd get you in to the rack a little more. Now, from there, descent looks pretty good. I think we could probably, maybe tuck the elbows a tiny bit more. We could maybe bring this touch down a tiny bit more, right? When we touch here, we've got a little bit longer range of motion. We touch here, we got a little bit less range of motion. So a lot of the times, less range of motion, you're gonna be able to move more weight. Now, in terms of how we're pressing here, this is one of the reasons that I commented on his elbow tuck, because what happens when we start to press is the elbows flare a little bit. And that's good, that's fine. We're not saying don't flare the elbows when you press, but if the elbows flare from a pretty flared position, what'll happen is the elbows will end up slightly behind the bar, and that will make it hard to press the bar back, right? Now, Raymond was talking about his bar path, and generally what we want to see in the bar path on the bench is this kind of like back and up movement. If you look at a lot of more novice bar paths, they're gonna look a little more like that, up then back. And when this elbow flares, a lot of times the shoulder comes up, the bar wants to go straight up or even out this way a little bit, as opposed to going back. When the shoulders stay down, the elbows stay slightly tucked, makes the bar naturally kind of list backwards over the shoulders as we press through the first part of the range of motion. So that's number 1. You can see that when that bar kind of speeds back up and starts moving, it goes from straight up. Oh, look at that. It starts coming back over the shoulders. That's where the bar speed picks up. That's where we get through the sticking point. So we probably want to get that bar back over the shoulders a little earlier. We do that by having a little bit more tuck on the way down so that when we flare, that bar comes back with us. The other thing it looks like you do is you kind of like reset before you press, right? So I don't think we're holding a lot of tension in the upper back as we're getting ready to press. A lot more novice pressers will think a lot about being explosive. We want to move the bar fast. We want to really punch it up and be aggressive. We want to do speed work and we want to push really hard. Sorry, that was a little bit much. But what we're trying to get, first things first, you know, if anybody's watched this channel for a while, you've heard me coach the deadlift. A lot of times what I talk about is patience off the floor. I want you to implement the same principles here. Patience off the chest. Think about that for a second. I don't want you to go intentionally slow, but what I do want you to do is prioritize positioning, prioritize tightness, prioritize that depression of the shoulder blades so that as we press, we don't just lose all of our shoulder position. Prioritize position so that the first little bit goes in the right direction. And then once we catch the bar back here and we start pressing straight up, boom, that's where we start pushing hard. That's where we start thinking about acceleration. But if we accelerate without good positioning, we've got no sort of base of support. We've lost shoulder blade position. We end up with what I like to call the cannon out of a canoe effect, right? If you think about, you're in a canoe. You got a cannon. Don't ask me why. This is just the scenario. Stick with me here, people. You're firing a cannon out of a canoe. Does the cannonball go forward, or does it just propel the canoe backwards at a wild speed? Now, think about that analogy applied here, right? When you press up, if we're loose here, are you just going to push yourself into the bench? Obviously not past a certain point. There's an object stopping you, but the same principle applies. The tighter all of this is, the better we're able to apply force upwards. So hopefully some of that tirade makes a little bit of sense, and that helps you out, Raymond. Best of luck. Up next, we have Ziggy. Now, Ziggy is doing, I believe, a heavy squat. So we got a couple of like close to max lifts here. This squat, 140 kilo single. Ziggy mentions that this is a max. It looks a little less than a max, honestly. Looks like maybe a 9, single out of 9, something like that. Now, one thing he mentions is he's looking for advice on his wrist. He says he gets some wrist pain, and he's wondering how wide should he be holding the bar. Also wondering if his depth is too deep. So, first off, if we're running into wrist pain, a lot of the times we're just going a little bit too narrow, right? When I moved up a weight class, I went narrower because my elbows and shoulders hurt a little bit. So I went ahead and narrowed things up so that there was more stress here and less here and here. That's seemed to work out for me. Now, a lot of times if we can widen this back up, we'll take a little bit of that stress off the wrist. So we can widen the grip a little bit. We can work on how we're gripping the bar. Right now, if your thumb is wrapped around the bottom of the bar, you can try putting your thumb over the bar. A lot of times this results in the ability to kind of like hook the bar with a straighter wrist and achieve a really nice back position. For years and years and years, I lifted with my thumb over the bar like that. It's totally competition legal, and for a lot of people, it's a lot more comfortable. So, number one, I would look at potentially widening the grip. Play around with it, right? You don't have to even load the bar up. You can put, 70 kilos on there, 60 kilos on there, and do a couple of reps. See how it feels in the bottom position, how your wrist moves, if it does, if it doesn't. Play with that width. I can't tell you exactly where to put it, but I can tell you that if you play with that width, you'll probably find a width that feels a little bit better. The other thing, like I said, is thumb under the bar or thumb over the bar. You can also play with that and maybe find a lot more comfort that way. So those would be the two things I'd check out. In terms of the depth, now Ziggy asked if his depth is too deep, and if so, if depth being too deep is limiting his ability to move kilos. So I do think that the depth is pretty deep, right? So let's see if we can frame by frame this to depth. So that's depth there, right? We've got the crease of the hip below the top of the knee, right? Crease of the hip, top of the knee. That's depth there. Now, where do we go to? We go about 5 frames deeper, right? So if I go frame by frame, we go about 5 frames deeper. Been learning fighting games, so everything's in frames. But at this point, if we could, or were able to, we would just really tighten up. We would use this as a bottom position. We would start coming back up from here. Because we go a fair bit deeper, yes, absolutely. Going extra deep will limit the weight on the bar. To a point, you might actually find that squatting higher is incredibly uncomfortable. It feels bad, but you might find that controlling this descent, because I noticed something here. You can also watch this real quick. So slow controlled descent, right about here-ish, we kind of just let loose, right? We kind of just dropped from there. And we utilize this big bounce. If we maintain that controlled tempo, we maintain that same sort of descent speed, I think that's going to be a little bit more productive. It's going to allow you to more accurately gauge depth. It's going to allow you to be more consistent with depth. honestly, other than that, I don't see anything wrong with your squat whatsoever. You have a great squat technique. Just control that bottom, keep the bracing nice and tight. Let's find a wrist position that doesn't hurt. And I think if you can squat a little tighter, yes, you can absolutely sacrifice depth and probably get a little bit more weight on the bar. Our next submission here comes from Bona. Hope I'm saying that right. Let's take a look. Oh, that sound on. Bona. 160 kilos for 5. Says this is RP 5 to 6. Started powerlifting 10 months ago, has done 2 meets, switched from conventional to sumo, and says he struggles with finding his hip height and that lockout is hard with heavy singles. And he's wondering if his shoulders might be out in front of the bar. The biggest thing I'm seeing here, just consistently, is we're just not really finding a good braced position. So even here, this is a bit better. We've got a bit lower hip position, which I think, generally speaking, probably going to be a good thing for you. But we're pretty averse to actually using our quads a whole lot here, or keeping our quads under a lot of tension, right? At this point, the hips shoot up, right? And we're pulling from this very stiff-legged position. This is where the bar actually leaves the floor, right? All of this hip movement from here all the way up, the bar is still on the floor. The bar doesn't start moving till there. So what I'd like to see is for you to be able to lift the bar off the floor without the hips coming up. Like we were just talking about in the bench press, it's partly patience and prioritizing position, right? Thinking about where we're pushing, how we're applying force, not just that we're applying it, but how we're applying force. So some of the cues I like to use for lifters is, number 1, be patient off the floor, right? That one's kind of self-explanatory. Number 2, keep pressure through the front of your feet. This is free, people. There's toes out. Keep pressure through the front of the feet. Keep your knees forward a little bit. Don't put them any further forward, but as you push, drive them forward. Keep them forward is sort of the operative word there. The other thing, maintain good lat tightness. I'm not sure exactly what's going on with your hips and low back. I can't really see super well from here, but generally speaking, when we end up with this higher hip position, we end up losing more back position. We end up in more of a posterior pelvic tilt, which is really hard to recover from at the top of a deadlift. That's why a lot of lifters start to struggle with heavier weights or higher levels of exertion. You know, it could be a set of 10, but still, if you're doing it to a 9 or a 10 RPE, then it's going to be hard at the end, right? When we see that real slowdown at lockout, a lot of the times it's lost position. And if we're defaulting to this very high hip, sort of stiff-legged position, generally we're not doing ourselves any favors in terms of position. We're losing more by ending up and pulling in that position. So those would be the biggest things there. You know, try to work out if you can get a little bit more extension. Maybe you can widen your stance a little bit and see, you know, if you can utilize that to some advantage, right? If you have a little bit of a wider stance, maybe things move and orient a little bit better and more comfortably in your hips. But the big thing is going to be keeping the knees forward, keeping a little bit more of an upright position, and really just pushing the floor away. Being patient enough to not allow your torso angle to change. Because the other thing that happens from here to here, right, is this is our torso angle at the start. Now let's scroll forward a little bit. Whoa! Big change in the torso angle, right? Generally speaking, this torso angle, because there's less degrees to get to being upright, less degrees of hip and back extension to get to being upright, is going to be easier on your hips and back, right? But if this happens, all of a sudden we have a lot more degrees of extension in the hips and back, right? A lot more extension to go through in those joints. So that's part of why we end up having those sticky lockouts. So hopefully some of that makes sense and it helps you out. Now the next video I've got for y'all here is actually kind of just a success story from one of our viewers. So this is Josh. Now, Josh sent in a video not long ago of a 635 pound, audio's on all of these, a 635 pound pause squat. Now, Josh in that video mentioned that, you know, his protocol for his drop back sets, you know, that I think he squatted like 635 and he took the bar weight down to 315 and added a bunch of bands and did most of his work with, you know, a relatively light sort of like bar weight and prioritized doing a lot of work against bands and stuff like that. Now, what I recommended, I think, was simply just to scale his volume up, you know, ditch the bands or use less bands, use more absolute load, or sorry, not absolute load, more bar weight, right? And to slowly work that up from that like 315 bar weight to heavier bar weight, right? So that you're utilizing, you know, that training stimulus is being applied across the full range of motion. When we train against bands and chains, especially if we train with really light bar weight, the weight's really light in the bottom. It may be extraordinarily heavy at the top, but it's really light in the bottom. So, you know, unless you're an equipped lifter, utilizing that much accommodating resistance can be tricky. Not saying it's not useful at all. There's probably edge cases where it is, but anyways, in this case, I gave him some really simple advice. Maybe Dylan can just like link the other form check in the description or something. But he sent me this. It's been about 3 weeks, and he says these are his words. He instantly broke through his sticking points. His confidence with weights is way higher now, and you know, 3 weeks time, and his squat's going crazy. This is 675 pounds for a comp squat. And yeah, I mean, it looks like a RPE, whatever the heck, RPE very low, maybe like 6.5, 7-ish. So anyways, just thought I'd share that. It's really cool. He's a big guy. He's doing a bunch of weight. I don't know. I think that stuff's cool. Hopefully you do too. That's why you're here, right? Anyways, thought I'd share that. Shout out and congratulations to Josh. I'm really glad that advice helped you, and keep it up. Keep it up. All right. Now, on to Tebow. So, Tebow is deadlifting 132.5 kilos for, I believe, a set of 5, if I'm not mistaken. And he says he usually pulls barefoot. Now, his gym makes him wear shoes. I think most gyms should make people wear shoes. I think for sanitary reasons, that's probably a good call. We should all be okay using shoes, or at the very least, socks. Anyways, I digress. Now, he says he's been working with higher hips because he finds that his hips, you know, would shoot up a lot when he deadlifted. And he says his deadlift feels great, really no issues at all in terms of how it feels or how things are moving. But he says he's a little bit concerned that his back is round, that his back is rounding, and he's wondering if that's a problem. He says he has no low back pain at all, but he's wondering, you know, is he in a compromised position here? So I'm actually going to leave this one. This is the last video of the video. So I want everybody to go down to the comments section below and let us know what you think. Do you think that this degree of flexion, or really any degree of flexion, is problematic in and of itself? Do you think that that maybe this guy who has not had any pain should be scared of this for some reason? I don't know, maybe I'm like begging the question here, but anyways, let us know what you think of this deadlift. If you see other inefficiencies or something like that, let us know. And I'm going to start off with Tebow's deadlift next week, which is the next time we will see you. If y'all like this content, make sure to like, subscribe, hit that little bell, and come by the live streams. We do them on Twitch and YouTube every Friday in the mornings. We stream lifts. We stream some Street Fighter. It's all good. Anyways, peace out.